The only question from friends that I heard more frequently about our family vacation than why Norway was, in February? They're not unreasonable questions from the perspective of people who associate vacations exclusively with summer, warm beaches, and paper parasol drinks. Norway is not on their vacation map, but it's on mine because I'd like to think my map includes the entire globe, top to bottom. Norway's place on that globe is at an extreme, about as far north as you can get while still standing on land. Its extremely beautiful landscape was carved by the glaciers of the Ice Age. Its days and nights shift twice a year between the extremes of daylight and darkness. Its climate is dominated by its nearness to the North Pole. Norway, Nordic, North. They are all about an extreme most fully realized in winter. That's why Norway. That's why February. We took the Vikings airline to the Viking homeland to begin our winter vacation in Bergen, Norway. Bergen is a major port, Norway's second largest city, and the southern terminus of Hurtigruten, a shipping line for people and cargo that has served Norway's coastal communities for 126 years. Bergen is also home to Ellie and Daniel, friends we have visited before, who are warm hosts and who patiently tolerate our American eccentricities. 15 years ago, Ellie spent a year as a high school exchange student in the part of North Carolina where I grew up. She knows the culinary distance from fried chicken to dried cod. She understands the words beneath my gravy-slathered accent. On our first full evening in town, a cold, brittle night, Ellie accompanied us to an evening service at Mariakirken, St. Mary's Church, where we could begin to immerse ourselves in the activities and sounds of our new surroundings. Bergen was also home to many of the artists who helped shape Norway's national identity during the 18th and 19th centuries, before it was a country independent of the royal families of either Denmark or Sweden. None was more famous or influential than composer Edvard Grieg, who built this home called Trollfjord on a Bergen fjord. His contribution to the national identity movement was in using Norwegian folk tunes as the basis of classical music that came to be admired worldwide. Our final night in Bergen, Ellie and Daniel had dinner with us aboard our Hurtigruten ship, the MS Trollfjord, before we sailed north to the Arctic Circle and the Lofoten Archipelago. 1893, it was difficult to travel up and down the coast of Norway. Sailors thought it unsafe to be on the water at night and in winter. In the far north, of course, there's a lot of winter night. It could take a month to deliver mail over land. Ricard Vith's solution was to build lighthouses, dredge the shallows, and create a steamship line named for a Norwegian word that described his new, faster way up and down the coast, Hurtigruten. Today, each of the 33 villages, towns, and cities where Hurtigruten stops between Bergen in the south and Kirkenes at the Russian border on the Arctic Ocean receives one northbound and one southbound ship every day. It takes 2 weeks for each ship to make the round trip. It's no longer necessary for these ships to carry mail, but there's still plenty of fish and other supplies to transport, cars to carry from one island to another, and tourists who've seen Waikiki, the Washington Monument, and the Eiffel Tower and wondered, what else is out there in this big world? We were headed to the fishing hamlet of Svalbard, about 100 miles above the Arctic Circle. We would reach it on the 4th night of our voyage after stops in the major cities of Ålesund, Trondheim, and Bodø, among the 15 port calls at all hours of the day and night that we made along the way. Some Americans freak out when they go to foreign countries. They run into strange currencies, the metric system, and 24-hour clocks. Norway has all that, plus another strange measurement. When a large part of a country is in the Arctic, it's the measurement that matters most. It's latitude, the measurement that says how far south or north you are on the globe. The equator is 0 degrees. The North Pole is 90 degrees north latitude. Latitude tells you whether you will see the sunrise on Christmas Day or whether you can hike at midnight in June. In February, every day in Bergen at 60 degrees north grows 5 minutes or more longer than the previous day. That's 2.5 hours more daylight at the end of the month. Just 2 degrees farther north, 120 miles for Americans, each February day in Trondheim grows 6+ minutes longer than the previous day. That's almost 3 hours more daylight at the end of the month than at the beginning. Each day of our cruise included a major stop of several hours in a significant city, a degree or two north of the major city the day before. Ålesund, a city rebuilt entirely in the Art Nouveau style after it burned to the ground in 1904, is at 62 degrees north. We had lunch on a mountaintop there overlooking the multi-island city the day after we sailed from Bergen. The next day, we spent the morning in Trondheim at 63 degrees north. It's Norway's 1,000-year-old Viking capital. Olav, the king who founded the city and converted his country to Christianity, is buried beneath this cathedral built in a bend in the Nid River. The plain on which we crossed the Atlantic was named for his wife, Astrid. In almost every city we visited, the latitude showed up in a subtle way, usually the name of a business like a restaurant. This is the entrance to a marina in Ålesund. 2 mornings after we sailed from Ålesund, before the sun rose, we passed another latitude marker. It had no numbers, but it's well known, even though it sits on a tiny, uninhabited island in the Norwegian Sea. It's at 66 degrees, 33 minutes north latitude, the Arctic Circle. 66 degrees, 33 minutes north latitude is a specific boundary for the Arctic. It defines a circular area around the North Pole where there's at least one day each year when the sun never rises above the horizon, and at least one day when it never sets. Things that are clearly delineated make people feel comfortable. But the reality of traveling Norway south to north is that despite the monuments marking the Arctic Circle, the Arctic is a place you ease into gradually. Two Arctic cities, Buda on the mainland and Svalbard in the Lofoten Islands, marked the turnaround point of our trip in the north. If you arrive in either city unaware that you have crossed a line visible only on a map, they are just two more Norwegian ports where fishing boats and cruise ships congregate in sometimes harsh but always beautiful landscapes. But when you are aware that this is the Arctic, north of more than 99% of your fellow human inhabitants on our planet, then it's almost impossible for your mind not to ponder your location on the globe. In Svalbard and nearby Henningsvær, tiny places in a group of tiny mountainous islands surrounded by often angry seas, my feelings were mostly about remoteness. It was similar in Buda, where the railroad tracks end at a station on the harbor front. All railroad lines end somewhere, but when you know these tracks are in the Arctic, then Buda Station feels like civilization's last outpost. This is the Arctic state of mind. Coastal Norway is part of the Arctic, but with its cities and ports, parents walking kids to school, and office workers at 9-to-5 jobs, that state of mind is an illusion. The Norwegian reality is that you arrive in the Arctic as an imaginary Viking, just before a buffet shipboard breakfast, and stay in hotels insulated from all but the sights and sounds of a different world outside. Our return from the Arctic was by land on the railroad that ends in Buda, the Northland Railway, or Nordlandsbanen. It's a 450-mile all-day train trip from Buda back across the Arctic Circle to Trondheim, where the railroad links into the rest of Norway's national system. The trip was partly research for a magazine story I was working on, and it gave me a chance to interview Bjørg Eva Osen, an historian for Norway's state archives. A few years ago, Osen discovered long-hidden records revealing how this rare Arctic railroad was built during Nazi Germany's occupation of Norway in World War II. The Nazis wanted to connect with the Swedish railroad serving an enormous Arctic iron mine in that country to supply their war machine. How NSB, Norway's government-owned railroad, took advantage of that desire is something railroad officials are still reluctant to talk about.
I understand why they don't want to answer, because it's a very bad story.
Mm-hmm. Is it embarrassing, the NSB, somehow?
Yes. They don't like to be confronted with it because, of course, people working there now haven't had anything to do with that history.
Mm-hmm.
They have never been able to say an apology and tell the truth. They have tried to hide the truth and just point to the Germans and say it's the Germans' fault. But it isn't.
The railroad had long wanted to extend its line northward, but pre-war Norwegian governments were frugal, Osen said. The Nazis brought in slave labor in the form of POWs from Germany's Eastern Front.
And the prisoners of war were not fed, they were not given clothes for winter in north of Norway, so they froze to death and they starved to death and they were beaten to death and shot. So it's a very bad story.
Today, Buda and Trondheim are important passenger and freight rail terminals. At Christmas, when the King and Queen of Norway take a break from their big palace in downtown Oslo and move up to Holmenkollen in the northwest fringes of the city, this is where they go to church. It's at the bottom of the big Holmenkollen ski jump, where my friends Hannah and Eirik took me when I visited them on the last weekend of this trip. Holmenkollen Chapel was the last of many churches that I saw and photographed during my 2.5 weeks in Norway, which began when our Bergen friend, Ellie, accompanied us to a Sunday evening service in her city. Religion plays a different role in Norwegian society than it does in the United States. It wasn't until this century that the king ceased to be the head of the Church of Norway, a Lutheran church, that Norway's parliament, called the Storting, surrendered its authority in appointing church leaders, and the Church of Norway's clergy were removed from the government payroll, although the government still provides financial support to the church. Norway's 5.5 million people, however, have moved away from formal religion faster than almost any nation in the world. About 70% of the population are nominally members of the Church of Norway, but that's down from 86% in the year 2000. More descriptive of the situation is that only about 3% of Norwegians attend Lutheran services or religious gatherings of any kind, as often as once a month. Yet Norwegian society reflects well the professed tenets of the world's large religions, including Christianity, which are concerned with how humans should collectively address the common needs of all. There is a public consensus, common across Scandinavia, that government has a legitimate and important role in ensuring that health care and other necessities of life are available equally to all, and a willingness to pay taxes to finance it. Yes, it's helpful that one of the world's most productive oil fields lies beneath Norway's waters. But no country has as many electric cars per capita as Norway, and few countries have so faithfully committed themselves to using their wealth for the common good. Which is a way of bringing this trip back to its beginning. From specific Norwegians to Norway, and now back to some other specific Norwegians, the ones who've been the proxy for their entire country for the past 30 seconds or so.
Eirik, you've done some work.
It's fun though.
The grown-ups want to make a whole big one.
Mm-hmm.
But the smallest one, he doesn't want it that big.
Hannah and Eirik live in a small rural area just far enough from Oslo that it takes some effort to get there, but not so far away that Oslo's conveniences and airport aren't easily accessible. Our trip to Holmenkollen included a fancy lunch we probably couldn't get in Osa, and a visit to the Viking Ship Museum. That's one of those places Hannah had always wanted to visit, but until company came to town with his own curiosity, had never gotten around to seeing. It's like when Emily and I have visitors in San Jose and take them to see something on their, and our, to-do list in San Francisco. But most of the visit was in Hannah and Eirik's environs. The skis were always by the back door, in case that's what we wanted to do. But we also covered the only in Osa opportunities, like the grocery store.
Have you had mackerel?
That's how you buy butter in Norway.
And hide and seek with Per and Olav. Sunrise meant it was time to take the plane home.